Retailers tell us the ammunition to use them has become near impossible to find or too expensive to buy.
And the White House later clarified the president's statement to News Nation, saying that the country's leftover ammo is dwindling.
It's going to be a long time until this thing normalizes, and you're going to have the stock that people are used to seeing from several years ago.
Which raised some questions about the future of ammunition sales in the state now that the new legislation is in effect.
It comes as the White House is walking back President Biden's claim that the U.S. is running low on ammunition.
Attorney generals express concern. All right, so picture this. 20 attorneys general, the legal big shots of different states, are basically sitting down together, scratching their heads and going, "Hold up, something's fishy here." What's got them all riled up? Well, it's none other than the sale of military-grade ammunition, finding its way into the hands of regular folks like you and me. Now, these attorneys general aren't just your average suits. They're the legal heavyweights, the ones who usually have their hands full dealing with courtrooms and legal jargon. But this time, they've put on their collective concern caps and fired off a letter. And what's the bone of contention? The civilian market is swimming in 5.56 millimeter rounds, the kind the military usually keeps to itself. Imagine you're at a barbecue, chatting with friends about your favorite CMMG boom boom gadgets, and suddenly these attorneys general crash the party with their worries. They're like, "Hold on folks, we've got a situation." They're not throwing around legal jargon here. They're genuinely concerned about these military-grade bullets ending up in our everyday lives. It's like they're saying, "Look, we've got our eyes on the ammo scene and it's not looking good." The civilian market is flooded with rounds that, in a different life, were meant for military-style rifles like the M16. Now, these attorneys general aren't trying to be the fun police, but they're linking these military rounds to some serious incidents, mass incidents no less. So picture these legal eagles not in some stuffy courtroom, but in a room together, penning a letter addressed to Joe Biden's new Office of Gun Violence Prevention. They're raising their collective eyebrows, expressing their worries about how these military-grade bullets are being sold like hotcakes in the civilian market. It's like they're standing up, waving their hands and shouting, "Hey, we need to figure out how the heck this is happening." They're not just complaining, they're demanding an investigation into the whole contracting process that allowed this ammo explosion in our neighborhoods. In a nutshell, these attorneys general are like the Avengers of legal matters, teaming up to tackle what they see as a potential threat to public safety. They're not just about legal jargon and courtrooms. They're real people expressing real in the face of military-grade ammo infiltrating our everyday lives. It's a bit like discovering your quiet neighbor is actually a superhero. Unexpected, but you're kind of glad they're on your side. Military-grade ammunition. Buckle up because we've got a letter from these attorneys general that's basically screaming, "Houston, we've got a problem." So picture this. They're not just sending a postcard, they're shooting off a letter straight to the new Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and they've got their crosshairs locked on a serious issue: military-grade ammo casually strolling into civilian territory. What's the fuss about? Well, it's all about those 5.56 millimeter rounds, the kind of ammo that usually hangs out with the military crowd. You know, the heavy-duty stuff used in military rifles, like the M16. Now, imagine you're out shopping for your everyday ammo needs, and suddenly you're faced with these military-style bullets. It's like your neighborhood gun store turned into an army surplus depot. These attorneys general aren't pulling punches. They're straight up saying, "Hey, why are these military-grade rounds doing the rounds in our neighborhoods?" It's not like they're against everyone having a blast at the shooting range, but when it comes to military-style ammo, they're raising their collective eyebrows. It's a bit like discovering your favorite food truck is secretly serving gourmet dishes from a five-star restaurant. Unexpected, and you're wondering, how did we get here? The letter isn't just a casual complaint, it's a spotlight on a real concern about the civilian market being flooded with ammo that in another life was destined for military missions.
Kelly, we know Americans are buying a lot of guns, but finding ammunition for those guns can be tough.
Retailers tell us the ammunition to use them has become near impossible to find or too expensive to buy.
One of my distributors just ran out of everything.
Comes as the White House is walking back President Biden's claim that the U.S. is running low on ammunition.
They're not using fancy legal jargon to say it. It's more like a bunch of friends sitting around and going, you know what's weird? Military bullets hanging out where our kids go to school and where we grab our morning coffee. They're worried about the consequences of having these heavy-duty rounds casually available to anyone with a trigger finger. So in this letter, they're not just expressing a concern, they're pointing fingers at the specific caliber, the 5.56mm rounds, and saying this is where we draw the line. It's like a collective to the idea of military-style firepower becoming a regular feature in our local gun shops. It's not about taking away your right to bear arms. It's about questioning why military-grade firepower is becoming as common as your morning cup of joe in the civilian market. Letter sent to Biden. All right, let's dive into the drama. So there's this letter. Not just any letter, but one that's fired off straight to Joe Biden's spanking new Office of the Gun Violence Prevention. It's like they've sent a memo saying, hey, we need to talk about something important. And that something is the elephant in the room. Military-grade ammunition making an unexpected entrance into the civilian scene. Picture this. A bunch of attorneys general, the legal heavyweights, putting pen to paper and addressing it right to the White House's Gun Violence Prevention Squad. They're not writing a love letter. They're basically saying, Joe, buddy, we've got a situation here, and it involves big guns and serious bullets. Now, why the fuss? Well, they're not sitting around sipping tea. They're genuinely concerned about the impact of these military-grade rounds on public safety. It's not just about Second Amendment rights. It's about questioning why military-style firepower is doing a little dance in our local communities. Imagine your neighbor throwing a house party, and instead of inviting the usual crowd, they've invited the Office of Gun Violence Prevention and said, come take a look at this ammo situation. They're not just sending this letter into the bureaucratic void, they're making sure it lands on the desk of the folks who are supposed to keep an eye on gun-related issues at the highest level. So, in plain English, this letter is like a neon sign saying, hey, we're not cool with military-grade ammo becoming the new normal in our neighborhoods. It's not about taking away your right to have some pew-pew fun. It's about flagging a potential safety hazard and asking, what's the deal with this military firepower mingling with civilian life? They're not going for subtle here. It's a straightforward, listen up, folks, to the ones in charge. It's a bit like your friend tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, did you notice what's going on over there? So this letter is basically the attorneys general making sure that the big guns in the White House know there's a concern about military-grade ammo playing hopscotch in our local gun shops. Call for investigation. Hold on to your hats, because the attorneys general are not playing around. They're throwing down the gauntlet with a call for a full-blown investigation. They're basically shouting, let's turn on the investigative spotlight, folks! It's not about pointing fingers randomly. It's about understanding the nitty-gritty of how these military-grade bullets found their way into civilian hands. Picture it like a detective story. They're not just going to sit back and let things unfold. They want to know the ins and outs of the whole operation. Who signed what contracts? What were the manufacturing practices that let this ammo flood our communities like a summer rainstorm? It's not just legal jargon. It's a demand for transparency. They're not saying, hey, this looks a bit sketchy. They're straight up saying, let's get the facts on the table. It's like your friend calling for a serious investigation when they catch wind of something fishy going on in the neighborhood. They're not satisfied with just scratching the surface. They want to peel back the layers and figure out the whole story. It's a bit like saying, we're not cool with this and we want answers. So this call for an investigation is like a rallying cry. They're not just expressing concerns, they're rolling up their sleeves and saying, let's get to the bottom of this military-grade ammo mystery.
And the White House later clarified the president's statement to News Nation, saying that the country's leftover ammo is dwindling.
For firearms and now ammunition. It's part of the Concealed Carry Improvement Act.
It is not unusual for a gun owner to have many firearms because they serve different purposes.
Number two, the pricing structure for what is available is off the wall. The prices are phenomenal.
Linking military rounds to shootings. The attorneys general are waving a red flag, and they're saying, hey, look at this. Military-grade ammo is making some unexpected cameos in tragic mass slayings. So, picture this. In the letter, they're not sugarcoating anything. They're straight up pointing to instances where the heavy-duty stuff, especially from the Lake City Army ammunition plant, was part of some really devastating events, mass slayings that shook communities to the core. It's not just a casual mention, it's like they're underlining the connection with a bold marker. They're saying, see, these military rounds weren't just lying around collecting dust, they were front and center in some real, heartbreaking moments. They're not beating around the bush, they're making sure you get the gravity of the situation. Now, they're not using fancy legal jargon here. In simpler terms, they're saying, enough is enough. We can't ignore the fact that military-grade ammo is playing a role military rounds are leaving a mark on these devastating events. It's like they're saying, we're not okay with this, and neither should you be. The letter is a wake-up call saying, let's address this issue head-on because lives are at stake. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Let's shine a spotlight on the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant, the center of attention in this letter from the attorneys general. They're not just casually mentioning it. They're ringing alarm bells about its role in manufacturing military-grade ammunition and how that stuff is finding its way into civilian hands. Imagine this plant as a character in a movie. It's been quietly churning out ammo for the military, doing its thing, and suddenly it's in the spotlight. The attorneys general are raising their eyebrows, looking at this place and saying, hold on, we've got concerns, serious concerns. So what's the beef? Well, the letter is not just hinting, it's straight up expressing worries about the military rounds produced at Lake City being sold in civilian markets. It's like they're saying, hey, why is the stuff meant for military use suddenly showing up where regular folks shop for ammo? They're not throwing around legal mumbo-jumbo. They're talking in a language we can all understand, the language of common sense. They're concerned that the Lake City rounds, initially crafted for military missions, are now making guest appearances in everyday communities.
The U.S. is once again seeing skyrocketing gun sales.
Yes, he has seen ammo shortages before, but never, he says, like this.
On average, between 2 and 4 years to set up a new production line.
It's going to be a long time until this thing normalizes, and you're going to have the stock that people are used to seeing from several years ago.
Now, they're not just stirring the pot for the sake of it. They're genuinely worried about the consequences of military-style firepower infiltrating civilian spaces. Saying, let's not ignore the elephant in the room. There's something fishy happening at Lake City, and we need to address it. Request for action. The attorneys general aren't just pointing fingers. They're rolling up their sleeves and making a direct call to action. What's the battle cry? Well, it's about protecting our good old Second Amendment rights, but with a twist. They want to do it while also tackling the tricky issue of military-grade ammo getting cozy in civilian territory. So, here's the scene. These legal bigwigs are not just expressing concerns, they're saying, enough talk, let's do something about it. They're not anti-Second Amendment. In fact, they're all about making sure your right to bear arms is as safe as a kitten in a basket. They're not aiming for a gun control free-for-all. It's more like saying, we love our Second Amendment, but we also need to address this situation where military-style ammo is doing the cha-cha in our neighborhoods. It's not just about writing words on paper. It's about actions that ensure everyone can exercise their Second Amendment rights without unintended consequences. In a nutshell, they're like the referees in a game, blowing the whistle and saying, let's keep it fair and square. They're asking for actions that safeguard your right to own and bear arms, while also putting a spotlight on the potential risks posed by the availability of military-grade ammunition. It's not a call to disarm, it's a call for a thoughtful approach. It's like saying, we can have our cake and eat it too, but let's make sure we're not accidentally setting the kitchen on fire. So when they talk about action, they're not just throwing words around, they're aiming for a practical solution that respects your rights while addressing the challenges posed by heavy-duty ammo in civilian hands. Prohibition of military weapons. The attorneys general are not just voicing concerns, they're taking it up a notch with a bold proposal for the long haul. They're not satisfied with just talking about the issue. They're saying, let's put a stop to this once and for all. What's on the table? A call for future production contracts to have a crystal clear clause, no selling military weapons and ammo to civilians. They're not just talking about a temporary fix, they're looking ahead, thinking about the future. It's not about limiting your rights, it's about being smart about what kind of firepower should be readily available to folks outside the military realm. Imagine your friend saying, let's keep the keys to the sports car out of the hands of toddlers, for everyone's safety. It's not about taking away your Second Amendment rights. It's about drawing a line in the sand when it comes to military-grade firepower. They're not saying you can't have your toys. They're saying certain toys are best left in the hands of professionals. So when they talk about the prohibition of sales, it's not a ban on fun, it's a strategic move. It's like saying, we're all for a good time, but let's be mindful of the kind of tools we're putting out there.
That the government is buying and hoarding ammunition to keep it out of the hands of law-abiding citizens.
Which raised some questions about the future of ammunition sales in the state now that the new legislation is in effect.
Is government overreach, and business was slower than normal today.
The ammunition market is dried up. There's virtually no ammunition available.
It's not just about the current ammo situation, it's about setting a precedent for the kind of contracts we sign in the future. In a nutshell, they're not just throwing ideas into the wind, they're putting a stake in the ground. It's not about being anti-gun, it's about being pro-smart decisions. So when they say, let's prohibit military goodies for civilians, it's a call for a well-thought-out, forward-thinking approach to keep the balance between rights and responsibilities. Potential impact. Let's dive into the discussion about the potential consequences of restricting the availability of military-grade ammunition. As we explore this topic, it's crucial to approach it with a balanced perspective, considering both the concerns raised and the potential impact on the market dynamics. Firstly, when contemplating the idea of limiting the availability of military-grade ammunition, one must recognize that this could indeed lead to changes in accessibility. The concern here isn't about turning these rounds into rare commodities, but rather acknowledging that making adjustments in the distribution could alter the ease with which individuals acquire them. Imagine your preferred brand of ammo becoming less prevalent on store shelves. It's not about sounding alarm bells, it's about recognizing that if we introduce constraints, the landscape of available ammunition might experience a shift. While not predicting a scarcity akin to hunting for a needle in a haystack, it's a pragmatic consideration that changes in availability could occur. Now, let's delve into the financial aspect, the potential impact on costs. The speculation here is not about throwing arbitrary figures around, but understanding the basic principles of supply and demand. If military-grade ammunition becomes less accessible, the remaining supply might be viewed as more valuable, potentially leading to an increase in prices. It's akin to the economic principle where a decrease in supply, coupled with sustained demand, could result in higher prices. This isn't a doomsday prophecy, it's an acknowledgement that changes in market dynamics could influence the cost of these rounds. Think of it like that local joint you love. If it suddenly becomes the hottest spot in town, you might find yourself paying a bit more for the experience. In discussing these potential consequences, it's important to note that this isn't an attempt to predict chaos or create fear. Instead, it's an invitation to consider the broader implications and potential adjustments in the ammo landscape. Just as in any market, changes in supply and demand can influence availability and cost. Approaching the idea of restricting military-grade ammunition in the market doesn't mean opposing change or disregarding safety concerns. It's about engaging in a thoughtful conversation, understanding that any modification to the status quo can have ripple effects. We're not arguing against the concept itself, but recognizing that, like with any decision, there are multiple facets to consider. In conclusion, pondering the potential impact on ammunition availability and cost is not an attempt to undermine the importance of safety or Second Amendment rights. It's an exercise in foresight, considering the potential shifts in the market dynamics. The intention is not to instigate panic, but to encourage a balanced perspective on the potential consequences of altering the current state of affairs in the ammunition landscape. Civic engagement and accountability. Let's delve into the vital aspect of civic engagement and accountability, a perspective that transcends any specific content creator and resonates with the essence of a robust democratic society. The call for citizens to actively participate in the democratic process is not just a passing sentiment, it's a foundational pillar upon which the strength of our democracy stands. In the realm of civic engagement, the idea is to go beyond the role of mere observers and become active contributors to the democratic dialogue. This goes hand in hand with the recognition that in a democracy, the true power rests with the people. It's not a passive relationship where citizens merely consume information. It's about being proactive, staying informed, and engaging in the conversations that shape our collective future. Consider this as akin to being part of a neighborhood watch, but on a grander scale. The call for civic engagement is an invitation to each individual to be vigilant, to know what's happening in their communities, and to extend that awareness to broader societal developments. It's about realizing that every voice, every informed citizen, contributes to the vitality of our democratic system. Now, let's unpack the concept of accountability. It's not about playing the blame game. Rather, it's a fundamental aspect of holding elected officials responsible for their actions. These officials are not rulers. They are representatives chosen by the people to safeguard their interests. Accountability ensures that this representation remains true to the democratic ideals, preventing any perception of overreach or decisions that might compromise essential rights. Consider this as a checks and balances mechanism, not in the legal sense, but in the spirit of an engaged citizenry. The call for accountability is a plea to citizens. If you've entrusted someone with the authority to make decisions on your behalf, it becomes your responsibility to ensure they exercise that power judiciously. It's an expectation that those in power are held to a standard that aligns with the principles of democracy. This is not about blind trust. It's about fostering an active dialogue between the governed and those who govern. If there's concern about decisions that might impact fundamental rights, or if there's a perception of overreach, it's not just about grumbling in private. It's about finding the courage to stand up, voice those concerns, and participate in shaping the course of democratic governance. Imagine a society where citizens are not merely passive recipients of decisions, but active contributors to the decision-making process. It's a bit like saying, we have the tools to shape our collective destiny, so let's use them. The emphasis on civic engagement and accountability is a profound recognition that democracy is not a one-way street. It's a continuous dialogue that demands the active participation of its citizens. In essence, this perspective is not tied to any specific individual, but represents a universal truth about the nature of democratic societies. It's a viewpoint that transcends personal affiliations and emphasizes the enduring principles that underlie the democratic ethos. The call for civic engagement and accountability is a call for citizens to step into their role as active participants in shaping the destiny of their communities and their nation. It's not just a suggestion, it's an essential element for the sustenance and flourishing of any democratic society. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.